What is your life?
My life is Christ's, a vessel for his glory and a weapon for his kingdom.
So what's your podcast about?
Oh, it's about psychology, true crime, supernatural stuff, the occasional paranormal or philosophical rant.
Well, maybe I could check it out sometime.
What is your fate?
My fate is to fulfill his holy will. In victory or death, I serve the kingdom of God.
I understand now. The creed is a warning.
What is your fear?
I fear no man, no weapon, nor darkness, for God is my shield and my fortress.
We believe ourselves redeemers, avengers, saviors. We make war on those who oppose us, and they in turn make war on us. We dream of leaving our stamp upon the world.
What is your craft?
My craft is the battle against darkness. I wield my sword to protect the innocent, and my faith to vanquish evil.
Even as we give our lives in a conflict that will be recorded in no history book.
What is your pledge?
My pledge is eternal service to the one true God, Jesus Christ.
All that we do, all that we are, begins and ends with ourselves.
Welcome to Truth and Shadow, your guide through the supernatural. I am your host, BT, and this is a Shadow Short. Let's navigate the unknown on this brief journey into the depths of mystery. Long before France began to ask whether it had been judged or abandoned, before kings faltered and the church itself seemed to fracture under the weight of competing voices, there was a fortress in the south where fire drew a line that would not fade. Montségur rises from the Pyrenees not as a monument of triumph, but as a reminder of something unresolved. Its stones are broken, its walls incomplete, yet it carries a presence that cannot be dismissed. The air around it feels thin in a way that has little to do with altitude and everything to do with memory. It's a place where belief was tested by fire. In the year 1244, Montségur became the final refuge of a place whose understanding of reality placed them at odds with the Catholic world. The Cathars did not simply challenge isolated doctrines, they reimagined the nature of existence itself. They viewed the material world with suspicion, describing it as something fundamentally flawed, even corrupted at its origin. In contrast to the Church's sacramental vision, which held that grace could move through the physical world, the Cathars emphasized a radical separation between spirit and matter. This was not a disagreement that could be easily contained. It threatened the coherence of a society built upon the unity of spirit and matter. The response was decisive. A crusade was called, not against distant lands, but against communities within France itself. The language of holy war turned upon themselves, and Montségur became its focal point. The siege was long, exhausting, a slow constriction of life within the fortress as supplies dwindled and hope thinned. When the walls finally gave way, the outcome was presented in stark terms. Those within could renounce their beliefs and be reconciled to the church, or they could face execution by fire. What followed has remained one of the most unsettling moments in medieval history. Hundreds chose death. They descended from the fortress together, not dragged or scattered, but moving with a unity that suggested conviction rather than despair. The field below had already been prepared. Piles of wood were stacked. and the structure of execution stood waiting. The historical accounts describe them as singing hymns as they approached the flames. Their voices were not filled with hysteria, but with a calm that defied expectation. This composure has echoed through the centuries because it presents a problem that resists easy resolution. If they were deceived, then the depth of that deception must have been extraordinary. If they possessed some fragment of truth, then the certainty of those who condemned them became less stable. The official account framed the event as a purification, the removal of a heresy to preserve the integrity of the faith. Yet beneath that account, another layer has formed, and it was transmitted in the hushed tones of memory. Stories have emerged that something had been taken from the fortress before its fall, that knowledge or objects of significance had escaped the Inquisition. Whether these stories were true in a literal sense matters less than the atmosphere they created. Montségur became a place where the boundary between divine judgment and human certainty blurred, where the act of burning did not resolve tension, but intensified it. This memory did not remain confined to the mountains. It settled into the consciousness of the region, shaping how later acts of condemnation would be perceived. When another fire would be lit decades later, this time in the heart of Paris, the echo of Montségur would be present, not as a direct comparison, but there was a resonance. The question would rise again, though in a different form: what happens when those who claim to defend truth destroy something that might not be entirely false? In March of 1314, on an island in the River Seine, that question found a new voice. Jacques de Molay stood bound to a stake, his position in the world inverted in a way that would have seemed impossible only a few years earlier. As the leader of the Knights Templar, he had presided over an order that was deeply embedded in the fabric of medieval Christendom. The Templars were both monks and warriors, men who had taken vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, while also bearing arms in defense of pilgrims and sacred sites. They had built a network that extended across Europe, managing resources, facilitating travel, and operating with a degree of independence that was both respected and eventually feared. Their wealth and autonomy placed them in a precarious position, particularly in relation to Philip IV of France. His reign was marked by a need to consolidate power and secure resources, and the Templars represented both an opportunity and a challenge. Their assets could alleviate financial strain, but their allegiance to the papacy limited the crown's ability to control them. In a context where authority was constantly negotiated, such independence could not remain unaddressed. The move against the Templars was executed with precision. Arrests were carried out simultaneously across France, ensuring that the order could not coordinate a response. The charges that followed extended beyond political or financial concerns into the realm of spiritual transgression. The Templars were, of course, accused of heresy, idolatry, and blasphemy, but also including claims that they had denied Christ and engaged in rituals that inverted the faith they professed to uphold. Confessions were obtained under torture. Coercion and torture have a way of producing statements that reflect the demands of the moment rather than the reality of events. Jacques de Molay confessed under such conditions, yet later recanted, a reversal that suggested the initial admission may not have been grounded in truth. It's this pattern that introduces a tension that cannot be easily resolved. If the confessions were unreliable, then the foundation of the accusations become unstable. If they were reliable, then the recantation raises questions about why a man would withdraw a truthful statement at the moment when doing so would seal his fate. The process moved forward regardless of uncertainties. The machinery of accusation had already been set in motion, and its trajectory was basically impossible to alter. By the time de Molay stood at the stake, the outcome had already been determined. What remained was not a question of guilt or innocence within the human court, but something else entirely. His final request was to face the cathedral. This detail carries significance beyond its immediate context. It indicates a shift in the locus of judgment, from the authority of the court to the authority of God. In turning toward the cathedral, he aligned his final words with a higher audience, one that could not be coerced or manipulated the same way as human institutions could. When he spoke his final words, he did so with a clarity that contrasts with the instability of his earlier confessions. He declared his innocence and called upon divine judgment, naming both Philip IV of France and Pope Clement V as those who would answer before God within the year. This statement is striking not only for its content, but for its context. A man facing imminent death had nothing left to gain or lose, in the human sense of things, chose to assert innocence and evoke divine judgment beyond the immediate scene. The fire that followed, and in consuming Jacques de Molay, does what fire always does. It consumed, reduced, and erased. Yet the words spoken before the fire was lit did not disappear. They remained carried forward by those who heard them, and by those who would later recount the events. Their significance was amplified by what followed. Within months, both Philip IV and Clement V were dead. This sequence of events created a pattern that demanded interpretation. While in the modern framework, it might be approached with caution, attributed to coincidence or the general instability of life in the medieval period. But it's within the worldview of the time that such an alignment was rarely dismissed so easily. The supernatural was not an abstract concept, but an active dimension of reality, and events were often read as signs of divine or demonic influence. The idea that de Molay's words had been answered began to take hold. Whether understood as a curse or a prophecy or a manifestation of justice, the perception that an innocent man had called upon God and had been heard shaped the way subsequent events were interpreted. France, already under some heavy strain, began to perceive itself as a nation caught within a larger, unseen narrative. This perception was reinforced by the developments within the church. The relocation of the papacy to Avignon had already introduced questions about the independence of spiritual authority. These questions intensified during the Western Schism, when multiple claimants to the papal throne emerged. Each asserted legitimacy, and each drew support from different factions. The result was not merely administrative confusion, but a serious, profound spiritual crisis. For those who depended on the church as the mediator of divine truth, the existence of competing popes raised fundamental questions about how that truth could be discerned. At that same time, the French monarchy faced its own instability. The weakening of the royal line and the pressure of ongoing conflict with England contributed to a sense that the kingdom itself was losing coherence. The 100 Years' War placed France in a prolonged struggle with England, and military defeats compounded the sense of crisis. Battles that might have been expected to result in victory instead ended in loss, leading many to question whether divine favor had been withdrawn. It's in this environment the distinction between divine action and demonic influence became increasingly significant. The medieval worldview did not separate these possibilities into distant categories. It held them together, allowing for the interpretation of events as expressions of judgment, testing, or deception. The division within the church, the instability of the monarchy, and the repeated military failures all lined up and shown that unseen forces were at work. Well, some interpreted these events as signs of divine judgment, suggesting that France was being corrected for sin or error. Yet others considered the possibility that deception had entered the structures of authority, obscuring truth and leading the nation astray. These interpretations did not cancel each other out, they coexisted, creating a tension that reflected the complexity of the situation. Well, as the tension intensified, prophetic expectations began to circulate. Stories emerged of a maiden who would restore France, a figure who would arise not from positions of established power but from obscurity. These prophecies drew upon a range of sources, including traditions associated with Merlin, as well as broader currents of medieval thought. Their origins were varied and often uncertain, but their impact was clear. They provided a framework through which the chaos of the present could be understood as part of a larger narrative. By the 15th century, the situation in France had reached a critical point. The signing of the Treaty of Troyes, which named Henry V of England as heir to the French throne and disinherited the Dauphin, further deepened the crises. While the treaty had legal basis, it was perceived by many a violation of natural and divine order. From the fall of Montségur to the execution of Jacques de Molay and the subsequent deaths of Philip IV and Pope Clement V, created a pattern that suggested more than coincidence. Within this pattern, the possibility of a larger narrative became increasingly compelling. The question whether France was under judgment or being prepared for restoration remained unresolved, but the alignment of events suggested that a turning point was approaching. The memory of fire, inquisitions, the experience of division, and the expectation of intervention all contributed to a sense that the resolution of these tensions would not come through conventional means. The world had been shaped by forces both visible and unseen. It had been marked by decisions that carried consequences far beyond their immediate context. It had been influenced by beliefs that extended beyond the material into the realm of the spiritual. What remained was to see how these elements would converge and whether the voice that would emerge from this convergence would be recognized as an answer to the questions that had been forming for generations. The question was what form it would take. A kingdom stood on the edge of that answer, looking backward at fires it could not fully justify and forward to a failure it could not clearly see. The silence between those two directions was not empty. It was waiting, patiently. And somewhere in that silence, a voice was about to emerge that would force the question into the open. Not whether God still acted, but whether anyone would recognize it when he did.
You take the blue pill, the story ends, you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Thank you for listening. This is a free podcast based upon the value for value model. If you find value in this, or any episode, you can return that value by liking the show, subscribing to this channel, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend on your social media accounts. You can also donate on my website. Thank you again. This is BT for Truth and Shadow Podcast. You are the light in the darkness.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
It's a very strange, funny time where everybody would love to be able to be themselves, but they can't because they must fall in line with the person in front of them.
The terrible thing about searching for the truth is that sometimes you find it.
You take the red pill. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. You stay in Wonderland. Believe whatever you want to believe.
See, the more at peace you become, the less you tolerate chaos. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you.
You want to live that kind of life? I wish you the best. I'll be on the other side somewhere, you know?
Protecting your peace isn't about shutting the world out. It's about keeping your inner world clear enough to hear your own soul.
The truth, nothing more.